I think, especially for, founders or people who are in leadership or CEOs or whatever of early stage companies, I think one of the most challenging patterns that's, I think, are things that involve either expansion or contraction of the identity of what you are doing. And what I mean by that is like, you know, the, to build something, especially when you don't have full product market fit yet and so on, you need a lot of faith, and you're, selling the dream to people, whether it's investors, people who you want to join you, to help build it and so on. And so you obviously need to have a lot of optimism and conviction around like, okay, this is the picture of the future. And you rally people around that. And in order to build a great product, we together have to believe in that kind of definition of the future that we're all kind of gunning for. But we're getting feedback and data, and the world is changing under us. And I feel like over time, there have been like both times when we wanted to narrow our definition, where we were shedding part of our identity, and part where we wanted to expand it, that I think were some of the hardest moments, because it feels like some people feel that you break their promise, a promise that you made to them, where people feel like you told me, that we were going to build a company in this box, and that was the thing that was going to change the world. And now you're telling me, no, it's a triangle, and that's not what you promised me. And I think that's one of the it's something that's always a challenge for, as a founder, as someone who's trying to, really the promise, or really the real goal is to build a company that is going to, I want to build the most important healthcare company of our generation, right? Like that is really the goal. And the path that might change a lot. And so like, I think two examples of like where I feel like those are, that one, I'll give you one contraction, one expansion, one, both of which were interesting and challenging. I think one was that, we built this great genetics product that was, I think probably still is like the best clinical genetics product on the market in terms of the simplicity of access, the quality of the genetics, and so on. And we were trying to find, how do you get it into the market in a way that scales to create, a great business and a growing business and so on. And there are many paths to that, right? Like we were like, there's one path, which was like, more direct to consumer, where people just buy it out of their own pocket. One, which is like the traditional clinical channel, which is like, you convince doctors to order it for people, and then you bill insurance, and goes through the traditional, just be better at the old way of doing it. Or there's going into a new market or new way to access the market through payers, through employers and other sponsors of like, other people who care about large populations of people. And about 3 years ago, like, we had like kind of this hedged approach where we had more of a consumer side, more of a clinical side that was more of a traditional diagnostics company, and one that was more kind of like these large institutional programs. And the first two were existing markets, but one that we decided were not great markets. Like they were not the way in which you were going to change the world. And there's this other one that we're like, we think this is the pattern that aligns with the future, but it's still very speculative. And so we decided, and I decided, that we were going to cut that third of the company that was actually, trying to go after those kind of like legacy markets that were clearly not going to be the future for us, that we were convinced were not going to be our future. And so, that was, I think, one of the most challenging things, I've ever done in my career, which was to decide like, and a lot of these people were like, so I had to let some people go. I had to restructure a big part of the company, inject a lot of uncertainty. Basically, there's kind of like, a lot of safety and feeling like, okay, well, there's this old crank that exists that, at least is survival, and saying, actually, I remember like standing in front of the company and being like, we're letting go off the raft and we're swimming. Like there's no more raft and we're going. Right. And so that was very scary. But probably maybe one of the most important and impactful choices I've ever made. That I think, and obviously it was, very challenging, and like, to do it also with compassion, and, these are all people, impacted people that I cared a lot about, that we're close friends and so on. And so like we wanted to do it the right way, but really there was kind of like about like what is the right path for the company. And it was a contraction of our definition where it's like we were, letting go part of who we were, to try to be who we wanted to be, right? Uh, and the other one that I think is kind of almost the opposite is what we did with COVID last year. And maybe we'll talk more about it, but like I felt like there's a very similar thing that happens when you redefine the canvas in a way that to people feels like, oh, this is defocusing and it's letting go off our identity. For a lot of people, like, we, because we were doing amazing work in genetics, saying, oh, now we're also going to do things in infectious disease, felt like, oh, are we letting go off who we are? And it's like, no, actually, like, what we want to be is like the best healthcare company in the world. And that touches a lot of things. And there's a whole redefinition of our identity that's much more broad. That I think that was the right time to do that. And so I feel like those are the two types of patterns that I think are both challenging, but I think sometimes the most impactful ones that we can make.